Welcome back. We're going to get straight into this training game, and I am telling you now, this is going to be a victory. So overdue for a victory. I don't care what the rating is of the opponent. 18-17. I'm going to show you how it's done. Let's go. E4. We have a French. I really dislike playing against the French. It can just be really, really tricky. And in general, because I don't know the theory, and this is a very, I think, offbeat line. But not one that I'm particularly afraid of. I'm trying to see this in terms of a reversed move order. Like, let's say I'd played e4 and they had started with c5. That would be like a Sicilian. And in that, I would have played this. And then had they done this, I would have done this anyway. So I think I'm just going to transpose into this. And, you know, like any Sicilian, yeah, you can take my pawn, no question. But I take back, and we can go from there. Now, what I'm trying to do in this game that I really failed to do in the last game was to just abide by the basic principles of the opening. Now, you could easily make a claim for bishop g5 here because it develops a piece and it immobilizes one of his pieces, at least temporarily, and also somewhat threatens e5, but not really, because the moment you play this, he can A, break the pin, and or he can play h6. If he plays h6 and we come back, you know, whatever. We don't even need to think about that though, because even just breaking the pin here should be fine. And I think that move would be fine for us, but there are other possibilities that might be better. For instance, we could play this move, although then he comes in and pins us. Whereas if we play this and then he does this, then I think this is probably completely fine. All right, now I will consider if he does this. I think there I would drop back. If he plays this, I drop back and I lose the pawn with a tempo on my bishop. But in return, I weaken his kingside. So let's say, what if I want to do this instead? That gives him the option of playing d5. Then after take, he just takes back and he's the one with a pawn in the center. This is an option, but he takes here. I think, long story short, this, maybe I take. He takes with the queen, but I've given something up there that I don't really want to give up. So maybe this, he comes here, and then I just come here. Not to mention that this is also possibly a move. Obviously, I don't want to take too long here, but I don't want to get things, you know, really wrong. I don't want to play something like this, not learning from my last game. Now, knight d2 would be a possibility if I don't want to allow this, because then I can follow up with c3. I could also, and I haven't mentioned this yet, but I could play e5 immediately. That protects my pawn and also gains a tempo against his knight and says, where do you want to move with the knight? And where do you want to move with the knight? It also means in future I can play maybe something like this, this, and then this, supported by the pawn. So I suppose he's probably going to move here. Then there's c4. And where do you go with the knight at that point? At that point, always have to be aware also though that if e5, and I think this is typical theory, there's this check which picks up the pawn. So that doesn't work. Yeah, I guess I could say that I'm willing to go down this line and give him the pawn. I think that's probably the mainline theory. And it's also what I'm happy to do. It, for the moment, keeps an eye on this. Maybe I can't really stop him from playing d5. And therefore maybe bishop d3 would have perfectly been good as well. But I don't think I've made any kind of big mistake here. If he wants to play this, I would have a variety of, which he does. I do have a variety of options. Keeping in mind this is defended. The only thing is now this pawn is again not defended. So natural moves would be like this or like this. Of the two, I'm going to play this, and I'm going to do it relatively quickly because I want to be able to castle. He's about to castle. And one of the principles in the opening is try and castle if you can quickly. Now, if he does take the knight, I'll have to take back. And yeah, my pawn structure there doesn't look very appetizing. And that could potentially be a problem. But it is what it is at this point. At this point, there's nothing else I can do about it. And I have some compensation in the form of the bishop pair. So he brings his queen out, kind of putting some pressure on me in a variety of ways. But one thing I could consider is dropping this knight back to e2, thereby overprotecting my knight, taking away the possibility of him just capturing my knight. This pawn is still defended nicely. And I think there we're more or less okay. Maybe even this would be a possibility if I want to keep this knight more active, because it still defends this knight. If he attacks me though with this pawn, interestingly, I can play this bishop out, which maybe I should do anyway. But maybe here it's even better because he doesn't have the option of ruining my pawns in the meantime. So let's say this, and then a6, bishop e3 hits the queen. Queen has to move somewhere. Let's say it comes here. Well, then I sort of have to move my knight again. So it doesn't really solve my problems, but this, I think, is relatively better. Keeps everything together. Bishop e3 can still follow on the next move if I want it to. I'm still getting ready to castle. He can maybe play something like this, which sort of threatens mate, or at least threatens this pawn, and prevents me from getting my bishop out here, at least for now, but it doesn't stop me from castling. And it would be an expensive time. He would be investing time in moving his knight down here. I simply castle. Maybe he redeploys the bishop on this diagonal at that point, and I need to be able to protect this again, but it will already be defended twice, once by my king and once by my rook. And I can defend it again and again, once more with my queen if I like. And then even if I need to go again, I can even bring the knight back. So he just castles instead, which enables me to play this move immediately. He can go check, then if I take like this, he can win this pawn. But my instinct and also chess principle says that actually taking that pawn should be really dangerous for him because I have a lot of things developed here. But concretely, what have we got? He is attacking the knight there, so concretely there might be slight issues. And maybe I'd be better off after he takes to actually take with the pawn, at which point I'm still attacking the queen. Queen has to move. And once the queen moves, I can castle. But I could also just castle straight away anyway. We can get into this kind of a thing where I can immediately push him. Everything's fine there. I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to castle. I'm just going to castle. And at the moment, I'm the one with the pawn in the center. I've got 3 pieces developed, maybe not fantastically. He also has 3 pieces developed, but one of them I might be able to develop with a tempo against, thereby subtracting from his development and adding to mine at the same time. And What's his bishop doing? I think his bishop probably is better on this diagonal than on the diagonal it's currently on. But I can prevent it from getting to this diagonal by playing a3. If he takes, well, then he's given it up. And if he moves back here, then I can follow it up further with b4. I can also start with this bishop e3, and that's probably when he's going to try and play this move himself. So I actually will start with a3. Don't need to think about that one forever. Let's ask him where he's going. He takes. So I think the more natural move is simply to take with the knight. You could consider taking like this, but I think taking with the knight makes plenty of sense for now. Yes, he can put his knight here, at least in the short run. But we can expand and either maybe even fianchetto the bishop or put the bishop on b3, we shall see. He can put this here as well, not a problem. We now have to decide what comes next. And there are options. We can certainly keep a hold of this bishop now if we want. It's done its job of defending the pawn, which is now defended by the knight. So we can just retreat the bishop and hold on to the bishop pair, which probably isn't such a bad idea. We can even bring the bishop here, but he can just kick us away and we've lost time. It's not a complete loss of time though, because, hang on, if we do this, he can take this pawn. And if we take, we lose this. So I think if I want to keep the bishop, that's pretty sensible. And actually, that's what I'm going to do. I'll just keep the bishop for the moment. Bishop pair is an advantage if you are a skilled player. And, you know, I would like to think that I am a bit of a skilled player. What I need to do is figure out how to complete my development. Again, can I play this, give up the pawn, and maybe play this move? There's potential for something like that. Or am I better off playing b4 immediately to simply prepare this? Should I put a rook here to prepare this? I think those ideas are all relatively tenable. The other thing actually now I see that he's played d6. If I play bishop e3 and he takes this pawn, I can almost take this pawn, except that he takes here. But then I put my bishop here and I'm attacking the queen and attacking this. So this is worthy of calculation. Bishop e3, he takes the pawn. I take a pawn. He takes a knight. I come here. He takes a pawn. I take here. He takes a bishop. No, so it's not working for me yet. I really don't think that's working for me yet. I could try starting with something like this. Could even start like this now. With this knight move, I do give up on this pawn, however, which is a little bit annoying. And if he takes it, he's also defending the pawn that I was hoping to attack. f3 would make sense, except it's not possible, so the grandmaster level move, king h1, comes to mind to prepare moving this knight away. Yeah, that could definitely be a possible move. I think we could consider that move. The only other moves I'm considering is really this and this. So which do I want to do? I think I'm going to do this. I'm going to keep these ideas in reserve. And I'm going to play with this idea potentially. Although I'm going to play this first now. I'm going to play this because while the pawn is here, it supports potentially my bishop coming out. But at the moment I push this pawn away, my bishop won't be able to just rest on e3. So I put the rook here to defend the pawn. Now I'm ready to play this move, and I will. Attacking the queen. And I've still got pressure on this pawn. So where does he go with the queen that can also defend this pawn? It has to be here. Now there's this, and maybe he has to give up a bishop. This, you know, whatever, not so scary for him. This does it, yeah, you know, I could bring this bishop out this way. If we get a trade of this nature, He does have plenty of defense on this pawn, unfortunately. But how can we still proceed? We need to find a way to proceed. F4 is definitely an option. He's really forced here at that point. He's forced there at that point. Then how to proceed from there? We could also start maybe by pinning this knight. That's pretty nice of a move because it seems like he's going to have a ruined pawn structure there around his king. So we're giving up the bishop pair, but we're also gaining something tangible if we go down this route. Particularly if we're going to then play f4 and lift the rook and have some sort of an attack going on. I think those moves can make some sense. b4 might make sense. Then if he plays this, I'm not super impressed, but yeah, I think this move is certainly a possibility. He can bring the queen back into play. Let's say take, he takes, and then f4. I think that looks pretty nice, but it's certainly not my only option. I could also put more pressure on this pawn, which eventually he's going to want to push forward. Then take. Again, it would be nice if this knight wasn't here. And in the meantime, he might move the knight back. So I'm going to give up my bishop for the sake of ruining his pawn structure, or if he moves the knight, winning the exchange. Then I'm going to bring my queen up, probably double on this file, and try and make it impossible for him to achieve d5 without losing the pawn. That is going to be the basic plan, I think, at this point. What if he plays this here? Well, I simply take. So I think we've got a good position here. This is a weakness. And he'd love to get rid of the weakness by pushing it forward. And that square is currently helped by this piece, so that's why I'm trying to get rid of this piece. Try to get rid of this piece so that this is not going to be as possible as perhaps it once was. Now, can I attack the queen? Because this bishop now looks at this square, trying to help this move take place. But if I do this, has to move the queen. Let's say take, not sure about that. Now I don't have to give the bishop up yet, which is a very important point. Where does this knight now go? If I play this knight doesn't have a lot of good squares. I think he has to sort of come back here, which interferes with his defense of this pawn. So this. Maybe I just start like this. If he plays this immediately, then take. Can't say I really love that. Can't say I really love that. But take, he takes, and then f4, I think, is pretty nice. Once that is done, of course I need to find a way to follow up. What about this move now? b4. Then if this is played, I can play this, kicking that bishop back. I like that. Let's go b4. b4, if he takes, I have to take because my knight would be undefended. Then if he takes knight here, maybe I just do take this first up. All right, let's take this first up and then we'll go b4. Okie doke. b4 on the board, threatening this at any point in time, but we have to be aware of our knight and not wanting it to fall prey to some sort of tactic. Okay. Now f4 is a possibility. Pushing the knight back, although it has some squares it could use. So we could also just play something simple like this. We could... Our knight's not got a lot of great squares at the moment. So maybe something like this to reshuffle. This might also make sense. This may still make sense. If he takes, I take with the knight. Got to be careful of this pawn though. Could play this and then therefore look to play that afterwards. Let's do that. Let's push this pawn forward a little bit more. Gaining a bit of space on this side of the board. Don't want to push too far though. He's loosened his own bishop here, so we can play this now, which I think we will. We can play this move. We just always need to be careful about this knight. Maybe the knight can now do this. There's plenty of defense on this pawn, both by the bishop, pawn, and the rook. If I can get this knight to a more stable position, because at the moment it doesn't fall prey to any tactics as of yet, I don't believe. But this does represent a weakness in my position, this pawn here. So maybe after f4 I can sit my bishop here and my bishop can do some babysitting for a while. I think it would be nice to have this bishop out the way, because then after f4 and the knight moves, my queen has access to the king side. My rook will be able to come free again. He takes once. Now how to recapture. If I take this way, I'm hitting the queen, which is well and good. I can also take with the bishop. Taking with the bishop might be nice. Once he takes back, I then take with my knight, and my knight sits pretty, you could say. I can take back with the knight because I hit the queen, but then this pawn also does become weak. So maybe I rushed that decision, and after take, I can't take with the pawn or the rook because then this knight falls. So if he does take, I do have to take with the knight. That would be obliged. And then I have to make sure I can actually protect a4. Or I have to plan for a future in which I allow a4 to fall, but instead he doesn't do that. He instead brings about an attack on my knight. And that's fair enough. I can understand why he would want to do that. But I want to try and do something else in return. Like, let's say I move the knight back, and let's say he takes this pawn, f4 then. Doesn't quite work. How about f4 straight away? He takes knight, I take knight. It's a possibility. I can also just defend the knight, maybe with my rook. That, I think, is nice. I think that's really quite nice, because when this knight, I should say, moves, I now have a rook already primed for an attack. And he can't attack me with his bishop at the moment anyway, so he moves out the way. That makes a lot of sense. But I am going to also continue making moves that make sense. I think this is one of them. I think this move makes a good deal of sense, except that it drops this pawn. I then come here, I've got a tempo on the bishop. Interesting. I could play this, but that seems to drop things, in a way I don't want to drop them. I could put my queen here. That might be a move at this point. That might be just a calm move to make at this moment. I could bring this rook over. If I do this, he can do this. However, whereas at the moment, take, take, take. Yeah, he still can do that. So, and I'm getting low on time, unfortunately. Maybe this, and if he takes... Look, I'm going to start with this move. It's a very active spot for the queen to be in, and I like that. In the meantime, everything is defended. Might be a little bit shaky in some respects. Like, can he take this pawn, I take, and then he takes this with a tempo on the rook? I guess he can, but he's given up a bishop for 2 pawns there. And my rook can be saved with a tempo against mate, which would be very hard for him. Well, he's got his queen here defending the mate, I suppose. But despite that, f4 and then bishop d3 would be potentially good moves to make. So he brings his knight, he brings his rook in, I should say. How about now this f4 idea? The only thing I don't love about f4 is that it does sort of open things up in a way I may not like to have them opened. When I attack the queen, he takes, and then I come here. He again does seem to be able to defend for the time being. Difficult scenario. It's a very difficult scenario with very little time left. I'm going to need to do something here. f4 it is. Very committal, but let's give it a go. I'd like to get my bishop back here, to be honest, but maybe not just yet. Maybe I just bring my queen back. In line with his bishop, to be fair, so maybe even all the way back here. Got to try and get these pieces into a more coordinated state. Moving the knight means I can bring the bishop back, but this pawn, like I've said earlier, can be a long-term weakness. This pawn here is weak, and I very much like that fact. But how do I attack it? It's not easy. The moment he has to move this, and that's a concern for him, then I can play this. If he takes, I can take again, getting rid of this potentially weak pawn, but also opening this very dangerous diagonal. I probably shouldn't have opened this diagonal. Probably should have been better to play f3, but I was tempted into the attack. So maybe I am best off doing something like this. We'll see. We will see. Something like this, I guess I can take, but I'm not sure what I gain by doing. So he moves back, understandably. And here I'm going to move my rook. Just overprotecting this pawn for the moment. Although I lose out on this pawn, once again, I am just falling prey to my own time trouble issues. But this game's not over. I mean, I'm definitely a lot worse now, because after he takes this, he's attacking the queen and also this pawn here. So with this diagonal opening up, I don't think the evaluation is going to be anything better than -6 or 7. I think he's absolutely crushing me here, or I should say I've crushed myself by getting into this ridiculous position and just allowing him this free pawn with double attacks that can't be stopped. So quite frustrating. I guess I can drop my queen back. He can take this pawn, but there's no compensation there. There's really no compensation. For some reason he hasn't done that, so I'm going to do this. Dangerous though this is, I can get my king off this diagonal. Or otherwise somehow trade this bishop, maybe just come back here and here. I might still be able to survive this. I don't think he played that correctly. All right. I'm going to come back here. Yeah, he can take once. But I'm going to try and come here and see if I can stabilize. This pawn may hang, but this pawn also hangs. Beware. I don't like what I've done, obviously. But I don't think he punished me correctly because he missed his chance here, which would have just ended the game. I think he's still better because look at my king. It's much more open than his, unfortunately. And he has a great big whopping time advantage. In fact, after this move, maybe I play this immediately. Pawn's pinned. He can do this. But after take, I'm not going to bother calculating it. I'm just going to take this. My knight's getting closer, in fact. Okay, so he's come up with a pin there, which is a nice move. And one that I must say I missed. But I can take here. He's going to have to take this now. He still wins an exchange. If he takes this, oh, I can't actually take the bishop anyway, can I? No, but if he takes here, no, it's ruinous. So he takes like he should with check. Now, I'm just going to move. But that gives him this pawn as well, with, again, an attack on my queen. Just hopeless. Just hopeless. Just hopeless. I mean, I should resign. But I'm not gonna. Anything I can do to make things anything at all tricky for him. Let's get out of this blunder, so now I can at least take. And let's come here. If he takes, my plan is this. And I mean, it's never over till it's over, I suppose. This is my threat, so he can prevent this threat by just pushing this pawn forward. It's probably the way to go for him, but then I can do this, try and eliminate this bishop. He takes, I take, reinstating this threat. It's probably what I'll do. He takes, I take. Then he can just bring the rook back. Now that's interesting. Check forces me to move. I really don't have another choice but this. It's looking very bad for me now. Is there a check? He takes, I go check. Unfortunately, he's always going to be able to get himself out of any of those kinds of scenarios. This does come with a threat of mate, but I don't think I'll ever have time to complete the threat. Especially when he has 6 minutes on his clock to finish working it all out. Yep, that's a pretty big check to give. I'll come here. Need to keep this queen here to have any hope. Now if he takes there, I can still come here with the threat of mate, but after this, check. He goes back. I come here again. It almost kind of looks like that would be a draw, doesn't it? But check. Well, I'm forced basically here, but he's going to bring his rook in. Well, I have to move out of the way of that rook then, don't I? So no other choice. Let's keep moving. We're attacking his queen, which he can, of course, bring back up here, at which point I can either repeat or I can maybe come this way. It brings the rook in, but now if I come here, which I have to, I'm still attacking this queen. I'm also attacking the rook. He's going to come here with a check and win the bishop, but the bishop is defended. So let's say now that I come here. Check forces a trade of rooks. This would be a big move, hitting this pawn. I mean, he should absolutely be able to finish me off from here. But I'm not happy with how I played this game at all. I'm really not happy with how I played basically the last 15 games on this channel. But if you are watching and you're sticking by, I am pretty confident that it's all going to be worthwhile at the Canberra Chess Club Championship. In those games, I have a lot more time, and hopefully all this experience is going to serve me well and I won't make such silly mistakes as I make here. Now here he's giving me a bishop. What's his big plan? He wants to go check. Then I come here. Or I can just come here, but then he's got the check that forces me back. So since I'm losing anyway, I'll take the bishop and ask him what he does do. I'm sure that he's winning, but I'll just ask him to prove it anyway. So what if I move back now? Well, I kind of have to, don't I? I'm actually forced. He wins this. There we go. There's a check. Not one that I like. It's going to be a mate now. Yeah, so he did it. Well done. Absolute shocker. Absolute shocker. And yes, I didn't end up showing him how it's done. I think he showed me how it's done. So unfortunate, but let's go back and have a look at this game. We started with this, I hate playing the French. He turned it into a Sicilian. And look, I think this is fine. In this position, I think if I could go back, I would probably play either this move, which I think is okay, but I don't love that it opens up this diagonal towards my king. I'd probably play this move, which loosens my knight, but it gets me ready to castle and everything's okay. It's very solid and simple. I think the way I played probably was fine. And in fact, the computer says, yeah, it's fine. If not, maybe even best. Or maybe I could have tried this, which I suppose would probably also be fine. And to some extent, all these moves are probably theoretical. So this was fine. What I did was, I think, theory. And probably here I should go with f3. I think this now makes more sense. Just keeping this super solid and saying if you're gonna take and give me the bishop pair in a solid move, solid position, then I should be fine. And the computer agrees that I would be fine here. Problem is he doesn't have to give the bishop pair after f3. So after f3, already the computer likes black a fair bit better. And I'm not sure exactly why that is. Is there some sort of sacrifice? No, there's not. Or in fact, this would work. So, but here I suppose I can, well, what do I do here if taking is so bad? No, taking is correct, but it's after the check. That's when we have to do things a bit differently. Probably king e2 makes sense. Then after he takes, you take back, check, probably just block. And here I can see why I'm better. In the first place, I've got 3 minor pieces versus 2, which is nice. In the second place, all these pieces are surrounding his lone queen, which means, you know, we're going to get easy trades and just trade into a winning endgame pretty quickly. Anyway, this is not the way the game went. The way the game went was I then played bishop d3. Things are pretty equal. He brought his queen out and I dropped the knight back. Here I felt pretty comfortable. Turns out there was a better option here. And I wonder, was that option simply bishop e3? And I can see now that bishop e3 is a very nice move. If he takes, who cares? You just take back. What have I got to worry about in this position? Absolutely nothing to worry about in this position. As played though, castles, I'm still doing fine. He brings the knight out. I think a3 is fine. He takes, I took with the knight. And that's fine. My position here is really nice. Here, I'm again doing really well, but I was not able to do much about it. I brought my bishop back to start with, which is fine. Then I played this king h1, pretending to be a grandmaster, which is also perfectly a good move, in fact. And after he developed his bishop, I played rook b1. Okay, not too bad. I wonder if it wanted this bishop e3 straight away. It does, and it says if he takes here, he's losing. The question though is why? I think maybe it must be this move immediately. Bishop d4. Protecting this, preparing some discoveries, and also just threatening. Well, now that I see it, where does his queen go? That queen is literally completely trapped and would have to take the rook. Wow, okay, so I was looking at this variation during the game that if he takes, maybe I can take here. And then if he takes this, I can maybe come here. But I didn't like it because he takes the pawn. And after I take here, he takes this. And then after I take this, he takes, I take. Well, I guess that's a little better for him. I'm not sure that's the exact line I calculated in the game. It might have been one move after. But I just missed that if I start like this, his queen has nowhere to go. Everything is taken away from the queen. So, yeah, that would have been a nice little queen trap. Missed it. Had I seen that, then yes, of course, here I would have played the bishop move immediately rather than preparing it with rook b1. That said, rook b1 is not the worst move in the world. I still have a good position. He plays his rook out. Now I play the intended bishop e3. He moves his queen. And again, you can see throughout this game, I've been in a strong and dominant position, which is really what you want. But I kind of lost the thread at a certain point in time. And it was hard to say where. I wonder if this move might have made a lot of sense now. If he moves back, I can relocate my bishop this way. And if we get a trade, I can relocate my knight this way. But really, my knight seemed a bit odd. I couldn't really take it anywhere. It was some disharmoniousness in my position. Maybe I should have started with f4 here. I'm not sure what I did play here. Oh, I tried to cause him some issues, and that's a fine move. It's a good move, in fact. And then I took. And again, this is all actually really quite good. But I think f4 was the decisive mistake when I end up playing it. I think b4 is fine. I'm gaining a bit of space. Computer doesn't love it, but I thought after this move that would allow me now to play this. And, the computer's basically unimpressed with all of this. Computer is basically unimpressed. I suppose he's probably going to come back here. So b4 it didn't love, but even if it didn't love b4, I think the position's still fine. It's equal. I'm not losing. Even after a4, I think I started to sense things were a bit shaky for me. What am I doing over here? This backwards pawn, I'm not achieving anything. I think that's really where I first lost my way, but still the position's even. And as we're going to see, I think this was okay, but I think here I made a mistake by taking with the bishop. And I think he should have taken with his bishop, but when he moved back, I felt slightly relieved. Regardless, yeah, things got a little bit better for me there. But just wait for, okay, so rook b3, slightly creative, not so great, but not so bad. He moves the king. Brought the queen out without really a lot of aim, but not the worst move again. It's a fine move. And finally, f4. And no, it says f4 is actually okay. It says f4 is okay. And after he moves the knight back, I'm still actually doing really quite well here, but it's difficult to see how. Maybe even this rook move would be okay. No. Maybe this knight move and just give this pawn up. No. Maybe this move. Yeah, this move looks all right. If he takes, I take back. No, now we're losing very badly. If he takes, we have to take back with the queen. Looking at this, if he comes over this way, well, now there's this, which basically has to give the bishop up for. I can see why this is now looking quite good for me. But really, I was in time pressure at this point where I might have had a chance to properly look at this. 13 seconds on the clock. And I played this absolute blunder. I would expect the bar is going to come well and truly in his favor here as a result of this move. Actually, no. This is only giving equality. I thought here I would have to come back. And then let's say takes. What do I do? Take? No. So well, I suppose I can take the knight. So what if he takes with the knight? If he takes with the knight, well then I've got check. He takes, I take, he takes, I take. No. Maybe when he comes here, do I come here? And if he tries to move away, he's going to get mated immediately. If he brings more defensive resources, now I take. Yeah, look, time was probably the biggest issue because all the moves I made, even though I may have missed the opportunity here or there, and I became overextended here, missing some ideas, I think I just spent way too much time, as always, doing not all that much. I think lots of moves here would be reasonable. I'm sure f3 is probably just fine. Again, it's not winning, but it's fine. Same probably with bishop d3. It's probably just fine. Yeah, not winning, but fine. Maybe even knight a2. Doesn't look to be as good, and you can understand why. It's probably not as natural of a move that I wouldn't have played f4. Anyway, long story short, I didn't win. I lost again. So what I can learn from this one, probably the same thing I can learn from almost all these games, and that's my time. My time management really needs improvement. So we'll focus on that in the next game. But until next time, thanks for watching, and we'll see you then. Thanks.